A warm welcome to each of you here in person, coming out to practice with the Sangha, folks who are online from all parts of the world. It's always wonderful to see how we can gather together as a community and support one another on this beautiful path of discovery. So, let's see, this is, of course, this is the Sunday Sounds program. That means we'll have roughly 25 minutes or so of guided meditation. And then I'll offer a Dhamma reflection for about 30 minutes. And then we'll have plenty of time, uh, if I keep to my schedule, we'll have plenty of time for questions, comments, reflections at the end, and the dedication of merits to close out. So that's the plan. And hello, Chaya. And just a couple of announcements before we get started. So there's a drop-in class happening on Tuesdays. There is the Autumn Gathering is coming up. Autumn Gathering is like Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's all wrapped together in one. It's a beautiful time where the whole Sangha gets together in a traditional way to sort of appreciate each other's efforts and each other's presence and each other's generosity, all the ways that we're giving. And what else is happening? Registration is open right now for both the November retreat on Buddhist art and how it shows the emotions and the feelings that we have on the path, as well as the December class on non-self from the perspective of Zen. So you can find all that on the website. And yeah, much more. Death Tea Room also happening at Deborah's place this time on this side of the Potomac, the west side of the Potomac. It's happening on November 1st. So the registration for that is also open. All right, so it's time to meditate. And today what I would like to do is to offer a guided meditation on cessation. So we're just going to we're going to look at endings, different types of endings. And I just want to encourage you as you go along in this meditation to just also notice if there are feelings that come up around endings, just paying attention to that. It's not necessary to, do a lot of self-judgment around it, but it's helpful to observe if there are responses that are coming out of that observation. Okay? Beautiful. So beginning by finding your upright and balanced and relaxed meditation posture. I like to always begin with just a bit of movement. And releasing any tension that you can. Sensing the weight of the body on your seat. And relaxing the belly, really allowing yourself to settle right here in this place, in this moment. And moving the attention up the spine, perhaps those bones coming into alignment. Perhaps releasing tension in the chest and letting the shoulders and the back become softer and wider. Softening the eyes and relaxing the mouth. Ah, so nice that we get to sit and be still. And now beginning to turn the attention to endings. Perhaps noticing the end of a breath the end of a thought, the end of a sound. Just noting cessation as it comes into awareness. Staying curious about endings. Noticing when cessation is known. And after some time of observing the cessation of phenomena, you might notice whether you want to settle on just observing one kind of cessation, like the end of the breaths or the end of sounds or the ends of thoughts. And now with this mind closely, excuse me, with this mind closely attending to phenomena, you might check in with your experience. Is there anything permanent, unmoving, fixed? And finally, in these last few moments of the meditation, letting go, allowing the release of all that is ending. All right. What a beautiful start to our time together. So if you have any comments or reflections or questions about the meditation, we'll take them at the end. And right now we're going to move on to the Dhamma talk. And so let me just check what this is in the chat. Sorry, just a moment. Okay. Beautiful. So as usual, we're going to begin with the homage to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And this is in the ancient language of Pali, a language that is not the same language that the Buddha spoke, most likely, but something in that same linguistic realm, you could say. And it's basically honoring the quality of awakening and the truths of our lives and the vast community of folks who are exploring that. So everyone's welcome to chant along. Please keep your mics muted. Folks online, all except for Claudia, who is translating. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. I have this fancy bookmark, but it doesn't really help you get to the page. Okay. All right. One of the most powerful things we can learn to do with our mind is to be mindful, is to learn how to bring a receptive, gentle, open attention to each moment. In fact, the Buddha very clearly stated, to 2,500 years ago or so, that mindfulness is always useful. And so I'm continuing on in this sort of informal series that we're doing right now, coming to the end of summer and the beginning of autumn, studying the what are called the foundations or the bases or the establishments of mindfulness. And there are said to be 4 of them. The Satipatthana is the establishments of mindfulness, and Middle Length Discourse number 10 is where you see what amounts to really a long list of different experiences, different aspects of our lives that we can attend to with mindfulness in ways that help to open up insight about what is the nature of this experience. What is this experience of a human life actually demonstrating? What wisdom is available to us right here? Dozens of ways, actually, described in this sutta. But right now, we are finishing up. I'm going to try to see if we can finish up the section on mindfulness of body, because mindfulness of body is the first of these 4 establishments, 4 bases, 4 foundations. And sometimes I want to give this reflection that sometimes it seems just all too obvious, right? Like, of course I have a body, and of course I'm paying attention to my body. But no, right? That's not our lived experience. You stub your toe and realize that you weren't really being mindful of your movements, or you have some pain that you have been avoiding. And until you apply your attention there, you don't really understand the nature of what that is. Or you imagine your body to be something that is still the same as it was when you were a kid. Right? This happens all the time. We run into concepts, ideas about our body. I remember years ago, I was having a practice discussion. Oh, I had not intended to share this, but now this is what's coming up. I was having a practice discussion with my root teacher, Sekkei Harada Roshi, and this is in Japan, where it's a very structured situation. And I'm sitting there in front of him, and he says to me, "Where is your true self?" And I started to do this, like touch my body, but then I thought, no, that's actually not it. But then I was stuck because I didn't have another answer. So he waited patiently for about another 30 seconds before ringing the bell, which indicates the end of the practice discussion. Right? Right? And these kinds of forms are intended to do exactly that, right? To kind of put you on the spot where you see your sort of bias or your very kind of underlying way of thinking comes out. In any event, we're going to look at 3 aspects of mindfulness of body today. And these are the last 3 that are mentioned. And as I said before, we started out with the breath, attention to the breath, attention to the posture, the 4, what are called the 4 postures: sitting, standing, walking, lying down. Attention to the body in activity with full awareness, sampajanya, right? So those are the ones we've covered already. Then we get to these last 3. And I want to say this, one of the things that is most fascinating about this sutta, and often overlooked, is that the Buddha consistently goes from a very visceral experience, a very precise examination of sensations and things that you can know in the body, to aspects that are more and more conceptual, more and more generalized. He does this over and over again in the suttas, but particularly in this sutta, we see him doing this with the body. Okay, so now we have gotten to the body parts. So we're going to talk about some of these attributes that sometimes people find difficult to relate to, and hopefully we will have some time to talk about that if that's the case for you. So the Buddha says, a committed practitioner reviews this body from the soles of the feet up to the top of the hair and back down, and notices these various things. Hairs on the head, hairs on the body, teeth, flesh, bones, heart, diaphragm, spleen. I don't know, any of you can notice your spleen, but he mentions the spleen, supposedly. Intestines, contents of the stomach, urine, and so on. Lots of stuff. And sees that as if, and he gives us this beautiful metaphor, he sees, or perhaps not so beautiful metaphor, sees that as a bag of grain, like different kinds of rice and beans, just all kind of mixed together in a bag. Yeah? And it's funny, years back, when I was a Theravada nun, when we were at Spirit Rock with Jetsuma Tenzin Palmo, very, very respected woman, teacher in the practicing Tibetan style of Buddhism. And she said, yeah, if you were to open up and look inside your body, you wouldn't think that it was so huggable, not so cuddly. That was her reflection on this particular study of the body. So why do that? Why have this kind of thinking, right? Why even attend to this in this way? Well, for one thing, I think that part of it is just like kind of get real, right? Get real about what's here. Not be so infatuated by what it looks like or how it's perceived by others or whether it belongs to you or not. But just get real about what's actually here. And as we do that, as we become more and more realistic about what's happening with the body, then we also understand this thing as a set of processes, right? It's a process that's happening here. It's not the same thing even for an instant. In the time between when I started the sentence and ended the sentence, the body is a different thing. So how could you get attached to that? How could you think that somehow you will be immortal? This is an interesting phenomenon, right? We've seen this throughout human history. People who invest entire cultures in trying to attain immortality of the body. In contemporary times, it's like the folks working on being able to freeze you and then wake you up again, it's like, really? Hmm. Hmm. Okay. And then what? And then what? So we examine the body and we try to get realistic about it and have a realistic view of it and know that it is this collection of processes. It is something that is dynamic, that is constantly changing, that is not fixed. And then he goes on to talk about the 4 elements. The body is 4 elements. And these 4 elements are earth, water, fire, and air. Earth, water, fire, and air. Again, a way of sort of looking at the body as just stuff, a collection of stuff. It's literally true, right? Some people think, oh, this is a very archaic way of thinking about the body, but actually, no, it's literally true, right? We are carbon-based beings, just like the earth. We are some large percentage of water, right? The fire element is heat. Goodness knows human beings' bodies are heat-producing machines. That's what we do. We take food and convert it into heat. Yeah. And the air element, right? Not just air in your breath, but air is oxygen in every cell of your body, right? So it's literally true, but it's also a way to talk about different principles of the body. Yeah. So the principle of the earth element is this kind of firmness or solidity that we feel in the body. And the principle of the water element is a kind of stickiness. Like if you had just a handful of sand, then it wouldn't hang together. But you need some water to bring it together. Like when you make dough, right? You take flour, you add some water, and you get dough. So that's the fleshiness that we feel is partly because of the water element. And the fire element represents this transformation, these chemical transformations that are happening, just as I was saying about digestion and aging, your heartbeat. When we say nerves firing, that's what we mean. That's fire element. Yeah. And the air element is associated with movement, right? So nowadays, physically, we know that you need air in your muscles in order to move, in order to run or to do any kind of activity. Mm. So again, it's this way of looking at the body as a set of processes, as a set of properties, as something which we can look at from different perspectives as a way to begin to perhaps loosen our grip on being identified with it. Right. A good example of how this happens for people is, we make decisions about what belongs to us or what's part of our body and what's not, and what's okay to lose or what's not okay to lose, right? And you see this in small children when they get their first haircut, right? You sit them down and you cut off a piece of hair and they start to cry. They're like, oh no. Huh? Because they haven't yet learned that it's okay to lose that bit, right? But what about if we go even further? And that's what the next step of contemplation is. So the next step and the last one in the contemplation of body is that contemplations. It's called the charnel ground contemplations. This is very particular to Indian culture. It says one imagines as though seeing a dead body, a corpse thrown on the ground, dead a day or two or many days. And one contemplates, oh, this body too is of the same nature. It will not be exempt from that fate. So most of us, unless you're in healthcare, unless you work in a hospital or a hospice or as a first responder, most of us don't actually encounter folks after they die. Maybe a family member. Maybe some of you have seen a family member or a friend. But this contemplation that, yes, that too is what will happen for us. This contemplation of death is part of getting real about what's going to happen, right? I was in India back in February, and we had the opportunity to go to Varanasi and see the ghats, see the places where these cremations happen on the river Ganges. And it's a part of the life cycle there. It's understood to be part of the life. And it's very honored. So again, this is very different than the search for some kind of eternal fix-up, some kind of age-defying soap. Huh? It's very different than that. This is really a recognition of the fact that our time is not unlimited. Our time in this body is not unlimited. There is a point at which this body will be done. And again, you might think, well, what is the good of that? How is that helping me? What is the spiritual aspect of talking about that? And it calls to mind this verse from the Dhammapada. So the Dhammapada is a collection of very short verses, very short teachings, collected from various parts of the suttas, and also apparently some original material in there. And very, very often translated, probably more than 100 even in English translations of the Dhammapada. And there's a verse in the Dhammapada that is very hard to translate, but I will give you a translation here by Gil Fronsdal that I thought was very useful. So this verse from the Dhammapada, this is verse 5 and 6. It says, "Many do not realize that we here must die, but for those who realize this, quarrels end." Many do not realize that we here must die, only because they don't think about it, right? Or they try not to think about it. Or they're actively working against it. But for those who do realize this, quarrels end. Not that we become completely passive individuals who are okay with anything, but rather that when you are aware that death will come at some point, then you can appreciate life. You can appreciate this moment of presence, this moment that was not guaranteed to you. And yet here it is. You can have perhaps even tremendous joy in this moment because of having accepted the fact that there won't be an infinite number of moments in this body, in this way. So I'll tell you a little story about my chaplaincy days. Some of you have heard this story already, so As my friend Elizabeth Corral says, es bueno repetir. It's good to, it's good to repeat things sometimes. So it was actually my last day working for this particular chaplaincy organization. I was going to go back and do some studies at the Institute of Buddhist Studies. And we were at lunch, my friends, the chaplains, and one chaplain was out sick that day. And at this kind of closing lunch for my last day, we received a text saying that there was one of her patients who was very close to death and needed a visit right away. And it wasn't somebody that I had seen. It was one of my friend's patients, but it was on the way actually to where I needed to go to turn in my badge and such. And so I said, yeah, I'm happy to go visit with her. I'm happy to go have a visit with her. So after lunch, I went to this nursing home where this person was living. And I got there and the nurse was like, yeah, please go in and see her. She's been very quiet, but, we don't know where exactly she is, meaning how close to death she is. And this particular lady was Jewish, of Jewish tradition. Yeah. And that was her faith tradition. And it's one of the faith traditions that I know really very, very little about. So I kind of went in there thinking, well, let's see, let's see what's going to be helpful to her at this moment. We don't even really know. Sometimes toward the end there, folks aren't conscious, but she, according to the nurse, was conscious. So I walk in the room, and the room is all dark, and there's a hospital bed to my left, and the hospital bed is empty. And there's a couch over to my right, and there's somebody on the couch, lying there on the couch. And I thought, oh my goodness, are they going to let her die on the couch? But then, this was that kind of place. Like if that's where she was comfortable, then they were going to let her die there on the couch. So I went over there to see what was going on, and she was so quiet. I thought, oh my goodness, maybe I'm too late. Maybe she's already passed, so quiet. So I leaned up close to her to see if I could hear her breathing. And as I got close, it kind of woke her up. She became aware of my presence. And I said, oh. And she looked at me, and I think I started to introduce myself, something like that. And it became clear that she wasn't going to be able to have a conversation. She wasn't at that place cognitively to be able to have a conversation. But that's okay. That's all right. I said, that's okay. My name is such and such and so and so. And then she said to me, but she was clear enough to ask me a question. She said, why here? Meaning she's asking me, why am I here? Why am I here in her face, in her room? Right? Some stranger that she doesn't know. Why here? Why here? And so I said, oh, I had to think about it for a minute. And then I said, well, I came to give you a blessing. I came to give you a blessing. And she said, oh, blessing. So she reaches out and grabs my two hands. And I say, okay. And I lower my head and I'm thinking, quietly, like, what am I going to say to this person? What kind of blessing am I going to give her? Not really knowing her much at all, but seeing that she really wants a blessing. And while I have my head lowered there for a minute, she says, blessing. And I say, yes, yes, blessing. And I close my eyes again because I'm thinking. And she says, blessing. And I say, blessing. And she says, blessing, 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 blessing. And I say, blessing, blessing, blessing. And it turns out that I realized a few moments into this that she was blessing me and I was blessing her. And we were having this beautiful moment of an encounter. She was so excited about blessing me. She was almost sitting up in bed. She's holding gripping my two hands and almost sitting up in bed. And I thought, I was so moved. I thought to myself, what incredible generosity of heart and clarity of heart that she has. This could be her last few moments, her last few hours of life. And she's not worried about getting something from me. She's here full on having this beautiful blessing encounter. That's someone who had come to the acceptance that she's going to die and found the freedom in that and the ability to find her joy and her presence with her life in that moment. Because this is a moment of life. It's not yet the moment of death. Mhm. So beautiful. So beautiful. Right? So when we attend to the truths of our lives, when we attend to what's really happening, that inevitably brings more peace. Because it is your resistance to the end that brings the suffering. Mm. So the kicker to the story about the chaplaincy moment is that I walked out of her room. She was still quite alive. I walked out of her room. I packed up my computer and my bag. This would be my last visit as a hospice chaplain for some time. And as I turned to leave, I saw on the wall a photo of Suzuki Roshi, Shunryu Suzuki, a Japanese monk who came from Japan in the 60s and founded San Francisco Zen Center, where I did my training and received my Dharma transmission all those years ago. Suzuki Roshi's face grinning at me from the wall of this nursing home as I left this woman's room. Mm. So know this body deeply, and let its fleeting nature bring you back to that beautiful appreciation of what's here, what's right now. Live this life now. This is the moment you have. This is the moment that you have. Don't waste it. All right, friends, that brings us to the end of the Dhamma talk. And it looks like there's a little juice left here in the microphone for folks who are here. Folks online, you can just raise your hand. If you have a comment, a question, a reflection. Yes, Allison. Yes.
Thank you. So as I meditated on the cessations, I actually wondered if there were any cessations, and I thought about duality and the myth of separation and how things just flow one into another, and some teachings on monastics and death, saying, but where could I go? I can't go anywhere. Of course, I'll be here. And a sort of a sense of it just kind of flows in one into the other. So I just wondered if you could, that's what came to me as I did that practice. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. So the it's something like both things are true, right? So there are moments of cessation constantly. The end of one thing or another. And that may become the condition for whatever is the next thing, right? But it's important to recognize that even the interconnected nature of things or the interdependent nature of things is still an interaction of various things. Otherwise, what happens is, if we don't understand it in that way, and in fact, we were just talking about this yesterday when Sachidara was here doing some beautiful gardening service for the Sangha. We were just talking about this yesterday, that if we don't understand that it is an interconnection of many things, of diverse things that are arising and present and then ceasing, then what you end up with is a solid, a fixed solid. And that's not the case, right? So the phrase that's often used in Zen around this is not one, not two, right? That we understand that there is both the interconnection and the sort of separateness and independence of conditions, right? And the other aspect, and the reason to be aware of the cessations is also because of the path really depends in part on our intention. And intention can be about stopping things, about ending things, right? So taking up an ethical life and saying, I'm going to, stop certain kinds of behavior or certain kinds of speech or things that are causing me or causing other people harm, or, right? Those are very important things to be able to acknowledge. And even I would say, to go even one step further, so if we understand the experience of nibbana or nirvana in Sanskrit, nibbana in Pali or nirvana in Sanskrit, as the complete cessation of all things, or this, it's sort of not even cessation, but like an absence of all phenomena, a dimension in which there is an absence of all phenomena, then one must be able to observe cessation in order to observe that, right? Otherwise, it does feel like it is a continuous flow, but it's like the difference between seeing, the film playing and that actually seeing that strip of, for you guys, the old school style, right? That actual strip of film with individual frames. Right. Yep, you're welcome. Yes, Jen.
Thank you for the talk today. Always wonderful. So a follow-up question related to the mindfulness of body and often what can be like body skills, and that sometimes like affectionate body scans or compassion body scans are utilized, and I guess the question I would have is like, those two wings, right? Like wisdom and compassion, right? And then, mindfulness of body brings clarity, and we can see like through marks of existence, et cetera, and that also the Brahma viharas can be practiced directly. So I guess like when we're, and thinking about like body scans that might bring in elements of like kindness or affection or compassion, like, is there any reference for that in like the suttas or the Abhidhamma, or I guess like what your kind of thought is on um, practices that invite kind of the kindness towards the body?
Yeah, I would say mostly in the suttas, we see a very, very dry perspective on the body. And what I want to say is, I think that those kinds of practices that you're talking about, right, this kind of compassion toward one's own body, can be very helpful as a way for us to find balance, right? So if you have a tremendous amount of aversion to your body, or a sense of self-harming, or a sense of being really harsh with yourself, right? Just like the Buddha, when the Buddha was before his enlightenment, right? Where he was doing all these very extremely harsh ascetic practices, and he had to stop. He had to say, that doesn't work. It actually isn't going to lead to the end of suffering. So you had to find a moment to kind of move the pendulum back in the other direction and take some nice food from Sujata, who offered it to him, and like that, and actually be willing to live in a building and things like this, It was like he had to really move the pendulum back to a place that was more central. So I think that's similar for us, right? We need to find a place, a realistic view of the body, which isn't driven completely by aversion and isn't driven completely by attachment and desire, right? But some kind of more balanced view.
That's kind of how like the Buddha would modify direction depending on the person and what's needed, right? Or how Buddhism travels and kind of meets the culture that it encounters, and evolves in some ways related to that. Thank you. That was helpful.
Yes. No, thank you, Jen, for bringing that up. It's beautiful to, bring in all the aspects of the path, because those Brahma Viharas are beautiful practices. I really highly, highly recommend them, and I do them myself daily. So, you have your hand up, but I also saw that Michelle said something in the chat about not being able to raise your hand.
I don't know
So
why I can't find the hand button.
that's okay. Your physical hand works well enough. Hi, Michelle.
And then I'm like, I'm not listening because I'm trying to find the hand button. I was very grateful for your story about being with the woman who is in hospice, it sounds like. I do work in healthcare, and I had a couple that I work with. The husband died this week, and I don't know them that well. So it was definitely one of those challenges where I wanted to be comforting to the spouse, but I don't really know the family that well, and I don't know their religion or anything. And I'm not called in as a chaplain, obviously. So I was just curious, um, if you have ways that you have worked well to provide comfort, like things like blessing might be a little too religious. I just wonder if there are things that you say in those kind of settings that maybe people find comforting in that, difficult moment.
Yeah. I mean, it varies so much, but one aspect to think about is to really encourage people to remember the love that they had for that person, ask them about what was it they loved about that person, or what was that person's special thing, special interest, special, talent, something like that. Like really to help people to understand that acknowledging the loss doesn't mean that the love or the care or the appreciation of that person goes away. That's not what they're asked to let go of, right? They're asked to let go of these kinds of, which is also quite hard. I'm not minimizing this at all, but what grief actually asks us to let go of is dreams about the future, right? Those that future that you imagined with that person isn't going to be like that. And sometimes people are ready to talk about that right away, but most often not. Most often not. So I really try to keep it on the side of just remember the love and remember the special, beautiful parts of that person, whatever you appreciated about them, no matter how sometimes very difficult the relationship was, there's some little kernel of something positive that can be remembered at that time, usually, you know? Yes, Brad, please. There you go.
So another story from hospice. Many years ago, there was a man and he was actively dying. And he said, some people get upset when I say this. He said, but I really must say that I've never felt healthier in my entire life. Because he had seen what was important and started dropping all the other stuff. And it can be remarkable sometimes to see within the final weeks and days of somebody's life the transformations that can take place. It's quite remarkable.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Brad. Thank you for sharing that. And it calls to mind, okay, yes, Esty. And it calls to mind actually something that I want to mention. And this is also perhaps related to what Jen was saying, which is when we talk about well-being in Buddhism, it doesn't mean necessarily that your body is perfectly physically healthy. Well-being, so when we practice metta, for example, loving kindness meditation, oftentimes a phrase that would be used to support that would be, may I be well, or may my loved ones be well, or may all beings be well. And when we say well, we don't mean that you're necessarily 100% physically okay or mentally okay. But well-being is possible, just as my beautiful friend at the end of her life there showed. Well-being is possible even when the body is ill or the mind is ill. We can find our place of being well right in the midst of the suffering or the difficulties of this life. So, SD, let me give you the, oops, I think this mic died, so let me give you this mic.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment and ask you about sort of what Jennifer was talking about also. Because in the suttas, we really don't find much kindness of the body. There's teachings of loathing, disgust of the body. That's mainly what I've noticed that we find in the suttas. So what do you recommend to people who come across that and come across those teachings that they might not be very beneficial for?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for saying that. It's quite true. Even Sariputta, Buddha in Pali, or Sariputra in Sanskrit, was asked about this after he was an arhat, and he said that he was embarrassed by his body. So yeah, I would say it's not particularly skillful view to be encouraging aversion about your body, despite what the suttas have to say about that. This is one of the situations, one of the occasions in which I would say you don't want to do that. You want to actually, again, try to find a sense of balance. So if you're infatuated with your body, if you feel very identified with your body, if you feel very worried about, what your body looks like and all that, then you might consider, how to get more realistic about that. But on the other side, if you feel like that, embarrassed about your body, or you feel loathing about your body, that's aversion. That's not particularly helpful either. That's what we're attempting to do, is to come to a state of equanimity by being realistic about what's here. That's really what's possible, I would say, around the body.
Can I have a quick follow-up on that?
Sure.
It's sort of a different subject, but it's very interesting. Because you're somewhat disagreeing with the sutras. So we're not fundamentalists, and we don't want to be sutra Bible beaters either. And I think you do find that a lot in some even Western sanghas that, it's written down, so it's what it is.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to mention that we can be critical of the sutras like we are of any other religious scripture.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. We can be discerning, I would say. That's how I relate to it anyway. We can be discerning about what we see in the sutta.
Because they're historic contextual.
Because they're historically contextual, right? You're talking about a very, very different culture in the time that those things are said to have occurred. They were actually not written down until hundreds of years later. And we know that there were various changes. That's what the councils are. That's actually people getting together to change the suttas, to fix them, to quote unquote fix them. Yeah. So we know that these kinds of things we do our best to try to see. And the good thing about there being thousands of them is that you can see where there are threads of thought and say, oh, okay, so most likely this actually represents what was being repeatedly taught and what was being passed down to different individuals. But yeah, always coming back to our lived experience and to discernment about our bodies, about our lived experience, and wisdom and compassion, right? It's two wings. And often wisdom can feel very dry or sometimes even kind of cutting, right? Like, no, it's, let go of that, right? And the compassion is recognizing that there are reasons why we have these views, or reasons why we behave these ways, and there are conditions that are in place for that. So just rejecting that is actually not going to usually deconstruct it in any way for you. It's not going to help you have the insight. And now I will go to another tangent, which is like, psychedelics, the use of psychedelics is something that has become used in different Buddhist circles and other parts of our culture these days. And people are investigating whether they might be more medically useful and so on. But people often say to me, oh, by taking XYZ drug, then you can have insight. You can have insight into the nature, your true nature. And I always say, I have to question that, because when you do that, what you've done is that you have forced open the door. So this is why it's related, right? Yeah. If you're forcing a view about something by rejection, then you should examine that, just as in the way that if you're forcing opening a door, you should also examine that. Because the path is about learning to work with our minds and bodies in a skillful way and discover, again, where I started the talk today, discovering the truths, the wisdom that is manifesting as this body and as this life. Not trying to make it something different, but trying to understand what it is. Yeah. Yeah. Great. All right, folks, we have come to the end of our time together, and Dana, dear Dana's here, so I'm going to invite Dana to offer her comments.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Giving to the Dassanaya Buddhist Community supports our guiding teacher, Dhammadīpā, the physical location at the vihara, and allows us to continue to offer Buddhist teachings in support of the awakening of all beings. Our support pages are on the website under the support tab, donate, volunteer, or offer materials. In addition, about once a month, we send an email newsletter with a letter from Dhammadīpā notice of meditation classes and retreat schedules, you can subscribe on the homepage. Thanks for being here today.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Dana, for being here today also. And yes, so dedicating the beneficial karmic momentum and karmic results of our practice here today to the well-being of all beings, that all beings might find their equanimity with the truths of their lives, that all beings might come to realize themselves as Dhammas, and that we all might have deep compassion for suffering and difficulty wherever we find it. By the power of the Buddhas, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and each person's, each being's efforts, may all beings be free. Okay, friends. Be well.
Gracias, Claudia. Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.